I'm live. Okay, it's Sunday morning. It's the 30th of April, 2023. And I'm reading, coming to the end now, of So Moses Was Born, a far memory book. It's a place in Egypt. Moses has now been born. And I have just read a chapter entitled The Son of Horus. That was quite an interesting chapter. And we are now at the heart of Ramoses. I think it is the 24th reading. Joan Grant was a prolific writer of far memory novels. She remembered her past lives. And this is her 7th book about the life in Egypt. She is, in this life, Nebunefer, who is an older brother of Ramoses, who became Pharaoh, and has been Pharaoh now for quite a long time, and he has just had an heir born to him. We are now at the time after the birth of Moses. The heart of Ramoses. You will by now have realized, my dear Moses, if you have not done so much earlier in my narrative, that it was your birth which I attended in the Hebrew village. This is a letter Nebunefer writes for him to tell him about his past, or before his birth. I confess that I was in a state of considerable emotion, and after the cobra withdrew from your presence, I found myself pressing the sole of your foot to my forehead, as though prostrating myself before majesty. I was in two minds, in fact I still am, as to whether the cobra was an actual snake, directed by Horus, or a divine messenger, who, though plainly visible to our mortal sight, had no physical reality. Lest the first be the correct interpretation, I wiped the joyful tears from my eyes, and, seizing a blanket, stuffed it hastily into the hole through which the cobra seemed to have departed. I felt strongly that a second visitation would be alarming and redundant. It was obvious that both you and your mother must immediately be taken from such unsuitable surroundings, so I went to consult Apu, who was waiting outside the door as to how this could best be achieved. He was in no wise disconcerted by the difficulties I had envisaged, and said that as the rest of us had been fully occupied, he had taken on himself the responsibility of arranging our discreet withdrawal. As soon as he heard the child cry, he had opened the door and assured himself that the joy was so freely expressed by myself and Ramoses was a proof that our prayers had been answered. He then went to the wine shop where Habakkuk's aunt had reached the stage of pliant intoxication. Feigning a degree of alarm, he informed her that both mother and child were dead. He stemmed her lamentation by saying that to prevent her being adversely criticized for leaving her niece in the care of strangers, we would arrange for her dead to be buried with decency and dispatch. Her wish to enjoy the prestige of chief mourner was less than her desire for gold, and another of my armlets, which Apu had brought with him in case of need, was all that was needed to persuade her to down her doubts in a further quantity of wine, which rapidly reduced her to a stuporous inattention. Apu had already noticed a small yard in which several coffins were stacked against the wall. It was in one of these that you and your mother left the place where you were born. An incident which, though trivial in itself, I commend to your memory, if any time you should feel yourself becoming unpleasantly or arrogant. The situation would have been easier in every way if Ramoses, during a hasty conference which took place in this squalid and fortunately deserted street, had not vehemently insisted that at all cost Habakkuk must continue to remain ignorant of his real identity. I confess that at the time I was angry with him, thinking that he was still unconvinced as to your divine origin, but I soon understood that he was fearful lest your mother should cease to love him if she knew too soon that he was the focus of her people's hatred. Again, Apu displayed an outstanding grasp of essentials and a most praiseworthy power of rapid decision. He reminded me that the house which Karaden had built for his favorite scribe had been unoccupied since the man's death. It was small, having only 2 rooms, but the garden was enclosed by a thick hedge of tamarisk, further strengthened by prickly pear, which had been planted to keep cattle from straying in from the adjoining pastures. The coffin was of thin boards, and the lid fitted so ineffectively that there was no danger of either your mother or yourself suffering from lack of air. We lined it with blankets and straw from the mattress, but it must still have been very uncomfortable. Our anxiety that the wails of a newly born baby from a coffin might cause interference, even from a race so unlikely to question the actions of Egyptians as are Hebrews, was stilled when you displayed an unusual prompt interest in your mother. I'm glad that at the time I did not realize that the scarcity of timber made it unlikely that you were the first occupant of this macabre carrying litter, the usual custom among your mother's people being to remove the corpse and bury it wrapped only in a shroud, thriftily retaining the more valuable funerary trappings for further use. Carrying a coffin any distance is far more difficult than carrying a much heavier litter that has been properly constructed. Or so I hope, though I have never been a litter-bearer. We avoided the tracks and set off across the cultivation, reaching the scribe's house when dawn had begun to colour the sky. So absorbed had I been in immediate problems that only when I went to collect a bed and other necessaries and saw a light in Karaden's window did I realize that he and Pempi were still waiting for news in what by now must have been a torment of anxiety. As I came up the path, I whistled the Song of Victory, which was composed by the master of the royal music in honor of the hero of Kadesh. It seemed a suitable tune, especially as Apu had informed me that Abaka's mother had been taken with other prisoners during an earlier phase of that campaign. Had it not been for Apu, who took food to the scribe's house twice a day, we would have had no news of Ramoses for nearly a month. He had given orders that no one else was to approach within 1,000 paces, and even for Karaden or me to do so would arouse his extreme displeasure. And he means it, said Apu cheerfully. He told me to say that if anyone except me intrudes on his privacy, he'll strangle them with their own entrails and feed the corpse to vultures. A most unnecessary addition to his instructions, said Karaden severely, and one which in ordinary courtesy you need not have transmitted. Pharaoh's orders, and he says that he wants prawns every 3rd day because she liked them when they were at the hunting pavilions. Prawns at this season? But I shall have to send to Tanis. Then send, dear, said Pempi. It would be silly to annoy him, Apu. Does she know who he is yet? No, he is still a soldier who was lucky enough to save the man who hired him from being killed by a leopard. I heard them laughing about it. An old man they called whoever he is, who was so scared that he gave Ramoses a collar of gold before he had recaptured his wits. Is the collar of gold supposed to have purchased the house? Oh no, it's only hired until they decide whether to take a half share in the trading barge which belongs to his cousin, or a 3rd share in a farm somewhere near Thebes. They ask my advice about it while I'm washing the dishes. Sometimes I think that he almost believes in his stories. I only hope that the people will continue to believe in mine, said Karaden. How much longer am I supposed to invent excuses for his absence? Memphis thinks Pharaoh is in Heliopolis. Heliopolis thinks he's gone to Thebes. Nebunefer keeps on writing letters to him that I cannot deliver. For all I know, they may be important. They are not, said Pempi. I read them. And as Ramoses sent a charming reply saying that he's had several most successful lion hunts and will return to her soon as you set him free from interminable wrangling with Katusil's vizier. You should have told me, Pempi. But you might have told me not to read the letters, she said reasonably, and a good wife prefers not to disobey her husband. Like leaves in slow but persistent current, we often tended to drift towards the straw stack. No, really? good advice not to... Like leaves in a slow but persistent current, we often tended to drift towards a straw stack, from which vantage point we could see the gate in the hedge which hid Ramoses from us. What I can't understand, said Apu, is why you are all so impatient for him to come back. He was happy with Mother, and now he is happy again. It seems all very natural and ordinary. Apu is right, said Pempi. It is we who have forgotten how natural it is to be ordinary. Ramoses is not ordinary, said Kaladin impatiently. He is Pharaoh, and has no right to behave like a moonstruck boy. Pharaoh is not someone inconspicuous for whom it is easy to provide suitable alibis. How much longer will even our own servants believe that the scribe's house is occupied by a distinguished foreigner and his wife, who are suffering from disfiguring skin disease, which is being cured by a secret treatment invented by Patmas? I have decided that it may be infectious, though why Apu should be chosen to be exposed to infection I cannot imagine. My love, you did imagine it, don't you remember? Apu had the same disease when he was a child, and so he is invulnerable. I threw away the clover stalk I had been chewing. Do you think Ramoses will see Bintanta? Thenru says she will reach Memphis sometime today. Why should he, when he won't see any of us? Said Kaladin gloomily. In any case, I think there's little point in taking her into our confidence unless we feel she can do something constructive. Persuading him to let Neb take Habaka and the baby to the living water would be constructive, said Pempi. No one will be able to do that, said Apu. I'm the only one who has seen them together, so I know he will never let her be sent so far away. But he is fond of the child? Of course he is. Why shouldn't he be? Then I shall point out to him most forcibly that to indulge his paternal instincts at this juncture will be to imperil our hopes for the future. A child known to be Pharaoh's chosen son would have a very poor chance of survival if brought up at court. Surely there are honest cooks in Egypt, said Apu scornfully. None of the girls at the old palace tried to poison each other, or at least they didn't succeed. My dear boy, you have no proper grasp of the situation. Except for Bintanta and to a lesser extent Meremta, Ramoses has never displayed more than a fleeting interest in any of his children. Yet 5 of them, to my knowledge, have died in most suspicious circumstance. If my word is insufficient, you have my permission to ask the opinion of Tamas. If Pharaoh can protect Egypt from the barbarians, surely he can protect a girl and a baby. But not against the Amen priests. Kaladin hesitated and glanced anxiously at me. Does he know about his mother? No, but you tell him if you think it's necessary. What about my mother? Well, it is a little difficult to explain, but she would never have gone to the living waters had Ramoses been able to protect her from the curse of the high priests of Thebes. Usermentu, a most unpleasant man, who fortunately is dead. Why did he want to curse her? Because she interfered with his desire to dominate Ramoses. You must remember he was only 15 when he came to the throne. This child is potentially a much greater threat to the power of Amen-Ra, or, to be more accurate, to the dark faction of the Amen-Ra priesthood, than your mother could ever have been, even if Ramoses is sufficiently discreet not to marry Habaka. Oh, they're going to marry? They often talk about it. I repeat, when, if he did not marry her, his surprising devotion will rapidly become the subject of profound and whispered speculation. The jealousy of the queen's women caused your mother extreme unhappiness, but what she suffered will be mild beside what Habaka could expect. The rival women will use the most ordinary weapons, spite, slights, covert hostility, and when these fail to dislodge the invader, it is probable they will resort to more subtle means. They will consult the priests and say that should a certain prayer be answered, their gratitude to Amen-Ra will be expressed in gold or ivory or cattle. Kaladin shivered through the evening was warm, though the evening was warm. No child, no adult, for that matter, could hope to withstand the concerted onslaughts of a dark priesthood. Oh, I'm just seeing my battery is almost empty. So, I think, while he was talking, I happened to be looking towards the tamarisk hedge, whose flowering plumes swayed in the wind like pink ostrich feathers in the hands of an indolent fan-bearer. I saw the gate in the hedge suddenly flung open, and Ramoses came striding towards us across the field. Hastily we slid from the stack, so that he would not think we had come there to spy on him, and by the time he saw us, we had reached the edge of the vineyard, where Karaden was pretending to instruct us in a new method of pruning grapevines. I'll stop this here. Happy Sunday.